Okay, great. We're recording. So first I want to start off with Pablo and I were talking after the last meeting after we were, oh, hello, Elena.
Hi, sorry.
Oh, that's okay.
Sorry, it's a little late.
No worries. So Pablo and I were talking after the last meeting about the article that the contractors wrote and making sure that, making sure that we distinguish between what the religion says or the texts of the religions, the teachings of the religion, and what theosophy says, and not blend the two. You know, we can see similarities or we can see correspondences or analogies, but we need to be clear. Just because we talked about that, just because I wanted to use that article, I was suggesting to use the wiki.
The problem, I mean, the blending is like in the Theosophical Society, we have the tendency to interpret everything under theosophical glasses, which is good, it's part of the process. But first we need to know what the religion says itself, because it is like saying, you know, if we say that Christianity teaches reincarnation, well, no, Christianity doesn't teach reincarnation. We can find traces of that. We can interpret esoterically certain teachings. We can say that at some point in early Christianity, they believed in reincarnation, but saying that Christianity teaches reincarnation would be wrong. And we do that with a lot of the teachings. So it's good, I always feel it's good to separate and say, okay, this is what the tradition says. Now, how can we interpret this with the theosophical teaching? Sometimes you see some depth, and that is also good. But in our mind, we have to know the distinction. Otherwise, we are just inaccurate. I remember because in Argentina, we used to give lectures on all the religions. And sometimes people from that religion will come and say, what you are saying is not true. Right. We don't believe in that. So we need to be a little more accurate.
And I think Annie Besant, especially, like we said in the beginning, especially in this chapter, she does a great job of doing just that, because I don't think we'll get to it tonight. I think it's in the second half of the chapter. She says, you brought up reincarnation. She says that Zoroastrianism doesn't talk about reincarnation, but it can be inferred from some of the teachings. And then it was also mentioned how a lot of the texts were lost and we're only dealing with fragments. So before we get started, does anybody else want to make any general comments about, you know, any check-ins about the reading or an overall impression that was made on them before we get started?
I was interested in how often she referred to occultism, you know, almost synonymously with theosophy. And today it carries such a different connotation. It's not anything that we would stress in a public talk so freely, because it might be misunderstood. But in her time, apparently there was no problem.
Right, I noticed that too. She called Orientalists versus the occultists. And so, and then by Orientalists, she meant the scholars, because I was looking up, you know, what she meant by that. So yeah, you're right. So that must have been laissez-faire. Anybody else?
Yeah, I wanted to. Can I?
Oh no, I was just telling him you had your hand up.
Yeah, at the same time that we're trying to understand what each religion is teaching, I think we have to keep in mind that one of the important reasons for comparative study of the religions is to find the common thread, because that is what points towards truth. If we have something that is, you can see that all the religions are saying things in common, then it points towards what might be truth.
Right. So a combination of the two. So, okay. So to start, Annie Besant starts out comparing Hinduism versus Zoroastrianism, the first subrace with the second subrace, the Hindus versus the Iranians. And at first I didn't understand why she chose Hinduism, but as you continue to read, you can see, she says in two places that I found, one in the middle of the book, she tells us she lays stress on comparison to give strength to the position of antiquity and dignity to the ancient faith. And then at the end of the book, she calls them sister faiths. So that makes very good sense. And then I just made notes that Zarathustra was an Iranian prophet, and that they give dates of 610 BC, 1000 BC, 1500 BC, 2800 BC, and then Aristotle gives a date of 9600 BC. And then, so at first I thought, why all the discrepancy? And then somewhere it's written that there wasn't just one
Zoroaster.
there wasn't just one, that they're continuous teachers on down the line. Did everyone else, or does anyone else have a expanding on that? I keep saying his name wrong, that's why I hesitate. So Zarathustra.
Continuing teachers, sorry.
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Mary.
Oh, it was just on page 49 where she says, they appear the same great teacher, the same liberated soul, the same mighty instructor over and over again, taking the same name, as though to suggest the spiritual identity to the deaf ears of men. And she was speaking there of Zoroaster.
Yes, that's what I liked. Doug?
She said,
Well, I was going to say the same thing, that there was the same soul over and over, but it's interesting that it would have to be reincarnating very quickly for the line to continue like that.
Yeah, well, liberated beings, they can reincarnate whenever they want. They don't go any longer through the process of devachan and all that. So, yeah.
Because devachan is really a process of assimilation, learning.
Yeah, as long as you are evolving, you need devachan, but then they are free from.
But they would take a different physical body, which would have had to go through the the birthing process and everything like that.
Yeah.
So it was just interesting. Maybe that's happened with other higher beings. It's just really the first time I've kind of seen it in writing like that.
What about like the Dalai Lama?
Oh, right. Good example.
Mm-hmm.
Maria, I think I cut you off. I'm sorry.
no, that's okay. I was just reading a little bit further on then. When
Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
He was the seventh in line of
Right.
these teachers. That's all.
All right. Okay. I think we are on about, in my book, we covered pretty much what the first few pages.
One question before we start, Michelle. So I thought the time period went from somewhere around 2800 BC to about 610 BC. So you got about 2200 years there. If there were seven of them in line, then there must have been spaces in between some of the teachers, because otherwise that's 200 years per incarnation.
Right. Well, Aristotle says it began in 9600 BC. So somewhere between 9600 and 610, there were seven.
Right, so that's still some time.
Yeah, probably there was some time between incarnations. At the same time, HPV suggests that the body of an adept can last for about 400 years.
Right.
I don't know if a religious teacher that is actively using the body you know, and the body's more exposed to many things. I don't know if it would be able to last for so long, but the adepts, you know, that live more in retreat, it seems that 400 years is possible for those bodies.
And maybe there was some time in between some of the appearances that they weren't really linearly arisen, you know, one right after the other.
Yeah.
Okay, so in my book, sorry, 1 second. Okay, so in my book on page 49 at the bottom of that, so that's this book. So I think you guys, your other books are a page ahead. It says occultism throws the beginnings of his teachings far back. Age after age, behind all these dates. Occultism has two kinds of records to rely on. Are we close?
Yes.
50 at the bottom.
All right, thank you. So first, the Great Brotherhood has preserved the ancient writings themselves, taken away at the time when they were written. These writings were safely stored in underground temples, underground libraries, where no enemy can find them. The millennium after millennium, the knowledge of the world is gathered in its written form, and there are men and women today who have been permitted to set eyes on many of these ancient writings, the very knowledge of which has passed from the world of profane history, writings in the ancient sacerdotal language, different from anything which the most ancient of the races now knows. So that was the first, was these underground libraries and temples. Now I'm assuming this is in physical form, these books are?
They are.
Yeah.
Yeah, HPV says the same in the intro to the Secret Doctrine. It talks about those underground libraries.
And then
that first sentence was interesting, where no enemy can find them. I'm wondering what was inferred there.
Oh, I think when Alexander the Accursor burned that Persepolis library, I think he's one of the enemies that, or yeah, that would be considered.
But they had a backup copy, it says later on in the book.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I was just wondering if it was referring to a different type of enemy, you know, not on the physical plane, or, you know, it's just a broad word. A lot of things came to my mind.
Okay. And then the second was what's on in the Akashic records.
Right.
The occultist depends also on those empirical records written, as we sometimes say, in the Akasha itself.
It reminded me too, you know, the Masons do it, where you have a secret, things are stored in secret, and you have to be in the secret society in order to get the understanding, you know, the real understanding of something. That's just kind of what it reminded me of.
Okay, and then the next paragraph says, thus the record can be verified by each successive inquirer. We have the testimony of expert after expert who studies these most ancient records and who sees not mere written characters, but the events of the past moving before him, exactly as they occurred, instinct with life. I just like that reading, and because we hear about that, you know, HPB says it, that's how she got her information, so. Okay. The next paragraph, we start to hear and about the midway down, the great prophet Zoroaster, who held to them the same position that Manu held to the original Aryan race. He belonged to the same mighty brotherhood and was a high initiate of the same great lodge, taught by the same teachers, the sons of the fire. Many of you will have read in those most ancient records of the Book of Dzyan, given in the secret doctrine of the Sons of the Fire, who were the instructors of all the great initiates, called in their turn the Lords of the Flame. He came as a teacher at the beginning of this Iranian subrace. Yeah, reading that, I was curious to learn more about the Iranian race as they are. Just as a, I don't know, a prejudicial comment, you see that we know so much about the Indians or the Hindus and their religion, and but we know very little about the Iranian race and their religion as far as it is in Zoroastrianism, or the connection. The next paragraph explains the multiple years. The same soul often reincarnates after time in the same office. Tracing down this line of prophets, the Zoroaster spoken of by Aristotle 9,600 years before what we call the time of Christ, and the seventh. We already went over that. The line of teachers who came to revive and reinforce the teaching when it was sinking downwards and was menaced with overthrow. The next paragraph, still later, that there was another Zoroaster about the year 4000 before Christ, who again revived the ancient teaching, again repeated the essential truths, giving them forth again the divine authority and by means of that sacred fire. Okay, so if they're saying that Zoroaster, or if Aristotle's saying that Zoroaster was the seventh in 9600, is that what he's saying?
Right.
And that everyone that came after was 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Right? Does that make sense to everybody else? Are you seeing that? Or did I make that up?
This is BC.
Right. So
Yeah.
he's saying that Zoroaster, the seventh of this name from the original Zoroaster, was in 9600 BC.
Yeah.
96 BC or 9600?
9600.
9,600.
And then it says here about the year 4000 before Christ, again another Zoroaster, who again revived the ancient teachings. So, yeah.
Because the second sub-race started hundreds of thousands of years ago. So the original Zoroaster has to have been,
Right.
very far in the past.
Right. Didn't Aban tell us that the original Zoroaster came with those from the previous moon, the moon chain?
She mentioned something about the Lords of the Flame, but
okay, so that's not okay. Sorry, I made that up.
I have a question. It's a little bit back when we were talking about them being instructed by the Sons of Fire. And then it says he came as a teacher at the beginning of the Iranian subrace to give them the ancient truths in a form fitted for a civilization that was to grow up among them. And then he says, in a form fitted for the type of mind which was to develop among them. What do you think she means by that?
What page is that in?
Well, I've got this hardback, and it's page 48. So it's just a little bit. We've already read it. Just Michelle read it just a little.
52.
So I think
52, Elena.
At the bottom on the left.
suited to train, evolve, develop them, etc. Just as other faiths were given to other people with the same object. But what was the type of mind which was to develop among them that was fed by this Zoroastrian philosophy?
So what were the second subrace, the Iranians, wasn't that the time of the Assyrians, Mesopotamia? Is that this, I don't know geography or anything else, but wasn't that same time? And they were great mathematicians, they were great scientists. So she says later on in the book that one of the fragments that came down was about all about the sciences. So maybe it was a scientific mind. That's my guess.
Yeah, I don't think she defines but I think that the idea is, you know, the Buddha talked to the Hindu kind of mind, and Jesus talked to the Jewish mind, and therefore the messages were different. So Zoroaster talked to the Iranian mind, but I don't know that. I don't know what particular quality they had.
No, but that makes that was my initial question, to know what the characteristics of that sub race are.
Yeah.
Aren't they working on a faculty?
Yeah, but we don't know.
Oh.
They were, while Europe was in the Dark Ages, but this is, you know, very recent.
Right.
The Middle East was the cradle of civilization. Europe, the Renaissance in Europe was to a large extent because of the influence of the Middle East and Iran and all that brought
Turkey and
all that region. But that was quite recent. I don't know, in the far past.
Right. When does anybody know when Mesopotamia was?
That's still recent compared to the beginning of the second subrace.
Right. Right.
You know, it's prehistoric. What the time that theosophy puts for these subraces is in the prehistory. We don't have any records.
Right, but I'm talking about 9,600 years ago.
Yeah, that's different.
Yeah, that's what I
was
talking about.
But even that,
or that would be 11,000 years ago.
I think history begins about 5,000 years ago, the first writing. So modern history. So that would be would still be prehistory.
Anyway, one of the things I was thinking of as you're speaking, I don't have a very good grasp of history, and for sure not what we could call prehistory. But here we have a faith that there is just this enormous, maybe a dawning ability to be conscious of other intelligences, especially the celestial intelligences. And then, as we learn later, there were all of these hymns and rituals and so forth, especially to encourage them to begin to experience these intelligences as a reality in their lives. And so maybe this was the mind beginning to wake up to the fact that there is one life and one great Ahura Mazda permeating all of the universe. Anyway, it takes a certain kind of mind to be able to reach beyond symbol into the living intelligences that are more than just the attributes of God, that they actually are. I think HBB talks about this in one of the commentaries to one of the first few stanzas, how we need to bring these teachings alive. And this was maybe the beginning of it.
Yeah.
In these early races.
Lena?
I don't know how believable this is, but I'm looking at Jinnarajah Das's First Principles of Theosophy, where he has a table of the sub-races. And the Iranian or Iranian sub-race is the third of the Aryan. So the first is the Hindu Egyptian, the second is the Aryan Semite, and the third is the Iranian. So it looks like, you know, the Hindu was way ahead. And even at that time, I mean, the teachings in Hinduism already had encompassed a lot of this very, well, at least like the idea of like Brahma, for example, Brahman. So I think, I don't know really what the dates are and whether this is believable.
So,
But it does show that it overlaps with the Mongolian race too. So that's more recent, I think. I don't know.
So, okay, so this is what I would ask then. So in the first subrace or even the second subrace in the Indian, in the Hindu people, was it taught to everybody, you know, that higher order? This is just
Only to the Brahmins.
right.
Only
So
to the
my
people
thought is
caste.
maybe Zoroaster was here to bring it to everybody. Because doesn't it say somewhere that they're an agricultural race and that everything, it was practical? Well, we'll find it later on, but that's what I was just thinking. Maybe in Hinduism, it was just one of the classes that was in touch or knew this, and maybe Zoroastrianism brought it to the masses. I don't know. Okay. So we are, all right, so I am on page 53, so it'd be 54 for Elena and the blue books. And then Maria and Pablo, I think you're back a page, so 52. As we study the succession of prophets, we see that from the ancient religion came what is called the great science, the magic of the Chaldees. We understand that the Magi of antiquity were teachers and priests of this same ancient faith, and that when more than 20,000 years ago, the Chaldean sage stood on the roof of his observatory and recorded the passage of the stars. He was one of the comparative modern descendants of the long line of the Magi, one of the comparatively modern representatives of the ancient Zoroastrian faith. So she goes even back further.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that makes sense with what Maria was mentioning, that they were in touch probably with entities and forces, the magic aspect of religion, which in the past, a lot of religions were far more in touch with all of that. As we became more science oriented, then all that was lost.
Then she goes on to tell us, let us then go back and look at the teaching in the light of its earlier form. In light of its earlier form, even although we have only its later recensions so far as scholarship is concerned. The next paragraph, just jump in when you have something. The next paragraph, let it be remembered that these ancient Iranians were Aryan and not Semitic. That is one of the points on which dispute has arisen, and in a moment I shall show you how the language bears out the occult contention. We admit, of course, in much later days, a Semitic intermixture, but the Iranians came from the Aryan stock and are really a sister race of the Aryans south of the Himalayas. Is Mongolia south of the Himalayas? No, sorry.
No, Mongolia, it comes from the fourth root race.
Okay.
What would be the difference?
What difference?
Who were the Semites and how were they different? Why is she making the difference? They were Aryan and not Semitic.
Right.
Yeah, I think what Besant Leadbeater explained is that when the fifth root race was beginning to be developed by the Manu separated these two groups, and one of those groups gave origin to the Hindus, and the other group gave origin to the Semitic people. So from the ancient Semitic people. So from those two groups, different sub-races came from those two groups.
So Hindus are Aryan, you're saying?
Yes, and the Zoroastrians come from that line.
There. Okay.
And the other group were the Semitic people.
So what other, oh, thank you. Nice job, Elena. So what other groups besides the Jewish people are Semitic?
Well, I think they are like the latest, branch that derived of those original ones. There were others that were lost in time.
So we don't know of any.
I don't know. But...
Okay. So what does Elena have here?
Have her describe it.
Just seems like in the Atlantean race, there's another kind of Semite subrace, different from the Aryan Semites in the fifth root race.
Right.
I don't know if this is helpful at all, but it kind of helps us to see where the Iranians are.
Right. No,
Number 3 down on the Aryan column. And I don't really know where Jinarajadasa got this.
Mm-hmm.
He doesn't say what's the source of this information. But you can see also how there's an overlap. There's a lot of overlap between the fourth and fifth, the Atlantean and the Aryan root races. And these sub-races are going on at the same time. I don't want to get us out of topic, but
No, that was good to look at. And where did you say Mongolian? Yeah.
That comes from the seventh in the fourth.
Okay.
Is that like the Chinese? I think it is.
Yeah. I'm not sure the Chinese where it comes from. I know that the Mongolian and all the islands.
Is that more Samoan or? Yeah,
I'm not sure. It's quite complex, as one would expect with any anthropology. I think what Gina Rajas is showing there is like a summary and a general, because you see that he says Hindu-Egyptian, Aryan Semitic. There was a lot. It's far more complex, but I think as a general idea, as what Elena is saying, is good just to have a certain image in our minds.
Right.
And then you see the Akkadian there. I don't know if that would be the same as the Sumerians. The Akkadians are under the Atlanteans, number 6.
Okay. So there are always remnants, isn't the right word,
Remnants.
But is it remnants from past root races or past?
Because the idea is that you have a population in humanity that belongs to a root race, let's say the fourth. From that population, a portion is separated that will be the nucleus of new sub-races. But then all the other sub-races that were there, they continue to evolve. So, and they become part of the next root race although they can trace their lineage to the previous root race. So the Mongolians can derive their lineage to the Atlantis, but the Hindus and the Europeans, etc., can trace their lineage to this group that studied the fifth root race. Okay. So that's the anthropology of it. We are all fifth root race right now. We are not giants. We don't have four senses, you know, but it's where you trace the lineage from.
Thanks, Elena.
Well, sorry for the diversion.
Oh, that's all right.
So I don't think it's a diversion, because I'm thinking about, you know, these people are all on different parts of the earth in a way. You know, they're in the same general region, but because our evolution at all levels moves right along with the evolution of the earth itself, then it has something to do with the makeup of their bodies, their fields of evolution, not only the overall, including the invisible intelligences inhabiting their region, but also the makeup of every one of their subtle bodies is linked to the geography, as you mentioned before, Michelle, of the place where they were living and moving. And then there were these migrations and mingling. So we have little by little the whole evolutionary field beginning to change with the comings and goings of these races and sub-races. Anyway, you know, I mean, because the human kingdom, the human hierarchy grounds the celestial regions on the material plane through mind. What was going on within our human evolution was affecting every other kingdom on the planet, and in a way, humanity almost paces the evolution of other forms of life. Anyway, those ideas just come to play when we're talking about looking at a chart of the different races and sub-races and their interblending and stuff. But looking at the bigger picture makes it very interesting because there's so many implications, and they're being very precise. Besant is being, and CJ, they're trying to be very precise here. And for me, it's almost easier to imagine a bigger picture because I can't grasp the details of all of these specific sub-races and where they were and how they lived and how their minds were different. Right. It's very interesting to me.
We might take a clue also from the fact that every root race emphasizes the development of a certain principle, for example, and the sub-races would be echoing that on another level. So I guess a combination of all of those.
Yeah. Okay, so the next paragraph that starts the first Zoroaster goes on in the middle of it, says, coming to found a civilization which had its own peculiar features, which was essentially agriculture in character, which was permeated through and through with the idea of the practical side of life, which was intended to train men practically in a noble faith and sublime morality. He did not give a metaphysical philosophy, and this was the first Zoroaster, a metaphysical philosophy and an exoteric religion, linking the two together. But he interbalanced the two so that it was well nigh impossible to give an account of each separately. A better idea of the whole is obtained by following his method and by studying the philosophy and the religion in a single system. Okay. The next paragraph goes on, having foresight of the special civilization that was to grow up, he gave an immense amount of astronomical science, so necessary for people engaged in agriculture, interwoven with philosophy and religious teaching. And he gave it in its occult form and not in its poor, dwarfed modern presentation. The next paragraph talks about, to him, the stars were not mere masses of matter revolving by blind, unconscious laws around dead, unconscious suns. The planets around the sun and the stars in the highest heavens were bodies of spiritual intelligences whose will was their guiding law and whose knowledge ensured the stability of the universe. He taught astronomy not as of dead matter and soulless energy, but as of living intelligence moving in changeless order, because guided by perfect wisdom and unswerving will. He taught astronomy as a living occult science of spiritual wisdom expressed in the material universe. That made me think that I wonder if, it seems like today we have so many choices that it creates a lot of anxiety. And to me, it seems like the people that were under in Zoroastrian religion and philosophy had a strong faith, or were taught that there was a strong faith with which to put your energies towards. And to me, that seems like that would take away a lot of anxiety, instead of wondering, which way do I go? What do I study? What do I believe in? What don't I believe in? I wonder if there was a more one-pointed direction. Next paragraph. The ethic was the glory of Zoroastrian creed. I'm in the middle of the next paragraph. A perfect practical purity is the keynote of that morality. Purity in every action of personal life, purity in every relation to external nature, honoring external elements as a manifestation of the divine purity, guarding as it were their spotless cleanliness as a homage to the life from whence the whole proceeds. These are the salient points of his teachings.
Yeah, you're talking about, he's talking about perfect practical purity. And like it says here, purity seems to be the key, not truth, not divine, but purity. And that's interesting that was what was considered, the divine, I guess.
Yeah, I don't know if that was
It reminds me of the Jains, in Jainism. It's kind of a group of people in India, I think. And I was told that the Jains are very particular about honesty. And so Joy and Shirley used to say that they would always bring their taxes to this guy here in Hawaii, the lawyer who is a Jain, because he's a very, very honest man. So I wonder if that's an example of practical purity.
Yeah, I would say. Okay, I think the next paragraph, she starts talking about the language, and I thought that was really interesting. She says the language of Avesta, which Abans talked about, justifies the occult statement of the antiquity of the Zoroastrian faith. And then as she goes on, those wonderful chants I'm on the paragraph. Not only is the similarity clearly and distinctly marked in the words that were used, about halfway down or towards the end, those wonderful chants of the ancient world, which have their results in the invisible, that control the lower intelligence and rise up the higher in the language of color and of music.
58.
And then I'm on page 58 now that talks about Zend, which some say is a language, while others say it's a commentary. So the next two pages, I'm on 58 and 59. The next two pages talk about Zend. And then I loved the spot, not loved, but it was a cool connection. It looks like the discussion was whether Zend was a language or if it was a commentary. And she seems to say it's both. And then they talk about Zend, Zend being, if you combine it, Zenzar, which is Senzar, which HPB talks about is the sacerdotal language of, right, symbols and sounds and colors. Mm-hmm. So I think Annie Besant brings that up because to show the antiquity of Zoroastrianism. So I have tons underlined on the next 3 pages. So does anyone else have any comments about that language or what he talks about Zend?
I just, is when it did talk about the language, signs, symbols, colors, because Blavatsky does use, goes into a whole thing on, in the doctrine, goes into a whole thing on symbols and what they mean. I wonder if this was mimicking that, which was from the ancient teachings.
Right. Oh, go ahead. I was just going to say, I think what Annie Besant is trying to do is show the connection between Zend, what the Zoroastrians call Zend, and what we or HPB calls Senzar.
Yeah, the idea is that the Senzar is a language that predates Sanskrit. So Sanskrit was derived from it. And Annie Besant suggests that the Zend was also derived from it.
Derived from what?
From Zenzar.
Oh, from Zenzar, right. I thought you meant Sanskrit.
No, so for that reason, these are very early languages. So the civilization, these are very early civilizations. But also all magic is connected to colors and sounds and numbers. That's how elementals are manipulated. So the language, these early languages had that incorporated.
Didn't Aban tell us that the teachings are in cuneiforms? Did she say that? Did I make that up?
I don't know.
So I thought some of the teachings were in these cuneiforms. So, but anyway, HPB says I'm on page 60. So HPB says at the bottom of that paragraph, the Zen text is simply a secret code of certain words and expressions agreed upon by the original compilers, and the key to which is but with the initiates. In the next paragraph, about halfway down, the paragraph starts many names. That occult instruction is given in that language and not in the clumsy sounds articulated by a physical tongue, and that from that language, truths are translated into the most ancient intellectual tongues derived from it. Anything else after that in the next paragraphs? Oh, here I'm on page 62. In the time of Alexander, it is admitted that there was a vast library at Persepolis and that he burned it either in drunkenness or in revenge. Hence, he is constantly called the accursed Alexander in all the later writings belonging to the faith of Zoroaster. And that was, I looked it up, it's about 400 BC.
Yeah, Alexander tried to invade India also, and they were defeated by an early army of a dynasty that was called the Mauryas, from which HPV's teacher derives. So the Mauryas defeated Alexander when he was trying to invade India or to conquer India.
Right. Here too, it says in one of the good things about conquering is that now there is evidence that at the time there were two sets of the complete Zoroastrian literature. One of these was in the library when it burned, and the other set was taken possession of by the Greek conquerors and translated into Greek. I think in other parts of this chapter, she makes connections between, well, Aristotle and Plato to the Greek teachings. That the later paragraph does that. Yes, Pablo.
In the book of Esoteric Christianity, Annie Besant asked the question, what is the purpose of religion?
Sorry.
Yeah, Elena's too close to you. There you go. Okay, go ahead and finish.
So this is the question of Annie Besant. What is the purpose of religion? And then another question, is religion trying to quicken the evolution? So what is the purpose? I think that is very interesting question, because if we had to study religion in order to know all these little details about history, philosophy, language, art. But I born in a very Catholic country, and I was involved with the church since a very young age. And it's practical. The church or Christians were involved in the affairs of the community. And so they try to teach moral and to awaken the spirituality in the community. So they teach the good things, like, okay, we have the 10 Commandments, which is great things to pay attention and to exercise. And they also try to teach the community to learn things like carpentry, arts, language to study. And we have in the whole world, the best universities are Catholics, even today. And in every country. So what the way of the church to advance, it was very different in the Renaissance, which the popes were not even educated. The pope were a personality with powerful personality, and they have an agenda for themselves. So if we look, this is the other book of Annie Besant, is Esoteric Christianity. And I think is more important for me, this one, on the other one, which is more history and other things. But, and the other question she has is really the Christianity really wants to help in the evolution? So that these two questions I think are very interesting. I don't know what you think.
We can discuss that when we study.
Yeah, Christianity's coming up in 2 months, I think it is. But yeah, religion in general, I think that's what Annie Besant, to me, that's what Annie Besant tried to stress here, was why the Zoroastrian teachings are important. Or I don't know, I didn't get to the end of the chapter, so I don't know if she has a conclusion. But I know, like, the next part, the top of page 63, she says, let's now turn to the literature itself. And to me, this gave me an idea about what Zoroastrianism wanted to teach its followers. So the first comes the yasna, which was hymns and teachings, which came from out of the mouth of the great prophet. And just jump in if you want to stop anywhere. These form the first part of the yasna, the hymns and the teachings. The second part are the prayers and the ceremonies. From ancient Zoroastrianism, for ancient Zoroastrianism knew nothing of that modern materialism which tries to place God at one pole of the universe and man and his world at the other. So it seems like there was more of a unity there instead of the duality that, say, Christianity has, exoteric Christianity. Mm-hmm. So in this same paragraph, she says, in Zoroastrianism, as in every other ancient faith, there was no gap in the universe, no empty space, no place where there were not living intelligences, no place where spiritual beings were not working. From man near the base of the ladder to the supreme God at its head, there were ranged intelligences mounting higher and higher, more and more divine, and all these were objects of adoration. So Dana, this kind of goes back to what you were saying about, you were seeing that it's more practical, but it sounds like within the literature, it's kind of influenced by everything is divine.
It's probably a pretty good place to stop.
Yeah.
Oh, is it time? Okay, yes, you're right, it is. Okay, we did pretty good. There's just one last thing. Thank you for watching the time, Maria. There's just one last thing I wanted to share. I don't think I have ever been thought of about the inauguration before. I don't think I ever knew when it was, but for some reason I've been reading more about it this year, which I'm sure other people are too. So I found this, some people were talking about the Guardian Wall. That is a teaching. I can send this out because I love the Guardian Wall. So I just wanted to read the first, let me get this out of the way. There we go. The first couple paragraphs. And so this is by George Arundel, and he says, a crime against one is a crime against the one. In these days of unrest, notably, he's not talking about right now, but in these days of unrest, when the messengers of darkness have liberty to be abroad in the world to change civilization, it becomes the urgent duty of all who believe in civilization to accept the challenge and cause it to be harmless, or at least to minimize its harmfulness. Within the great law, these messengers are at work, for there is not outside the law, but is for those who serve the light to render impotent the servants of the darkness. And just as the darkness seeks to spread its balefulness throughout the world and to enthrone might over right, tyranny over freedom, so must those who are servants of the light know no distinction of frontier, nor of faith, nor of peoples, must help to hurl might and tyranny from their ruthless dominance and establish right and freedom in their strength. And then a call for pure will. We need in the world men and women of pure will who will become on a very small scale a guardian wall against tyranny, oppression, persecution, violence, and the war spirit everywhere. So I thought that just would be a nice thought to end on. And as we begin, to end on, and then as we begin our, I'm having technical difficulties here. All right. So yeah, that was all I wanted to share with you.
Thank you for that. That's really beautiful. I'd like to have a copy.
Okay.
Yeah,
I will
very
send.
nice. And because the next sentence or two has to do with the fire of the spirit, it's very much in keeping with Zoroastrianism.
Oh, all right. Thanks for noticing that. Yeah, I found it at the last minute. So
That's great.
yeah, so I will send it on. And then are there any last comments?
Nope.
Joyce, you need to unmute yourself.
Will you be sending that on to us?
Yes, I will.
Oh, good.
Okay. Okay, so there is a Zoroastrian blessing. There is a Zoroastrian blessing. I can't remember what it is, but it's at the bottom of your email. So I wish you that. And peace and love and all that other stuff. So thank you. I loved this session. I mean, I like them all, but yeah, for some reason, like I said, I had an affinity I found for this. So any last words?
Only may the fire of the spirit bless the inauguration tomorrow and put us on a better footing.
Perfect. Thank you. All right. Blessings.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Good night.
Thank you.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night. Good night. Stay